Now we have some data to look at Excel. We need to check that the data is what it should be. So by clicking at the top of the column of data, holding down Shift and Control, we can highlight the whole range of data. Then what we need to do with this is have a look at what are the characteristics of the data and do they match what we suspect they should. So next we can click on Insert and then select a line graph. Any line graph will do. To be honest, the first one will do, which gives us a view of the data in graphical terms. Now there's a few things we can look at within this data set that we have here. We can look at from the graph the shape of the data and also the peak values. If we enlarge the graph that we've made, it will give us a better view of what's going on. So let's do that now, enlarge the graph. Now we can start to look at some of the values. So if we hover over the peak value, we can see it has a value of 112, and that will be 112 Newton meters, as it's a force turning about the joint. We can also look at how far along it is. So the point value, the 0.1883 that we see here, tells us how many rows of data, how many frames of data have been collected. Now, because it's at 1000 Hertz, it's at milliseconds, we know that every point is effectively a millisecond. But if you look at, by doing it this way, if I move slightly, my cursor slightly to the right, you can get slightly different values. So you either need to make the graph incredibly big at times or rely on another method for doing this. So it gives us a really good idea of the data. You can check this value against previous literature and see if it's suitable maximum. But for actual getting accurate values, we're better off looking at the actual raw data. So if we do that now, if we cycle up and down the raw data, we can try and identify roughly where that peak is. We knew where it was roughly by the graph, but we can identify it looks to be about 12.11, so 112.11 Newton meters. So that's another method of doing it as well, but again it's quite time consuming and you might miss the peak. So now let's look how we can use Excel in a clever way, save us time searching through for those maximums and to be sure we get the maximum. So we're going to calculate a maximum value now for this column. So a way to do it, if we go to the top of the column of data, right click on the row number, we can add an extra row within that data. Now you can do this wherever, this isn't a necessary step, but it just makes more sense to have the maximums on top. You can add labels wherever you want, obviously, so you know what that data is. Just remember, you might have to come back to this data at a later date and you need to be able to know what each value is and so make it logical. Okay, so to find the maximum, if we click on the cell where we want to insert the maximum value and then click on the function at the top, the FX button, what that does is makes a function appear which effectively puts an equal sign in Excel. You may have done this your own, you may have just done by typing in equals maximum, MAX, sorry, you've then identified it previously that way. Well, this way you're actually going to be using the function button. So by using the function button, we get given a various options on functions we can use. So the function we want to find is maximum. So if we just click on maximum, we can then click on OK, and it will tell we can then need to tell Excel where we want to apply that function to. So the function is maximum, and then what goes in the brackets will be the cells over which we're going to investigate to find the maximum value. Let's click OK. So at the moment it's just looking at D8 and D9, it's looking above the cell, that's its default. We're going to look below it. We want to look from D11 all the way down. We can click, so if we click on the button on the cell D11, hold down the Shift and Control and press down on our cursor, we can highlight all the data. So now you've got D11 to D7410. If you look at the top there. So it's found the maximum value across all of the data. So now we've done that, we can be confident that's the maximum value. So we're not going, there might have been a couple of peaks and we wouldn't be sure. So we'd have to go, and that would take quite a bit of time, but now we know the maximum value is 112 Newton meters. So you found the peak value.